I'm Justin Davis, and this is Drone Camps RC. All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Justin Davis, and I have a special episode here for you today. We're going to do a full review and flight test of this new Hacker Edge 540 version 3. It's a world-class 3D plane from Tower Hobbies. You can check these out on towerhobbies.com. They sent this to me to build it from scratch for you guys and flight test it. Now, I'm going to flight test it two ways. I'm going to do it line of sight as a traditional airplane RC modeler would, and I'm gonna fly it FPV for some of you FPV freaks out there. So I built it with all top spec components on here. I've got pretty nice Metal Gear Tactic servos in here. I have a Spectrum receiver on here. I have a Talon 25 Castle ESC that they provided with this kit. This is really nice. And we have a Rimfire 370 motor on here. So Rimfire motors are very, very nice. They have a whole line of Rimfire on Tower Hobbies. But this is a super lightweight plane for its size. It flies really, really nice. And what was amazing about this plane was the fact that I did take this out the very first day. All I did was set up the surfaces level on my transmitter, mechanically adjusted everything right here so that all the surfaces were completely level. When I went out to fly it for the first time, I put 30% positive expo into my Spectrum transmitter, and everything, it was perfect on the first flight. Line of sight flight, it flew straight out of my hand and straight up in the air. I didn't even have to give it any down trim or up trim on the elevator, which was kind of amazing for an airplane. If you've ever trimmed out an airplane, an RC airplane, you know sometimes you have to really take some time to get everything dialed in correctly. But I was pretty amazed that this flew right from my first build perfectly. And then after that, I did some FPVing with it, which was actually a lot of fun. I've never really flown FPV on this style 3D plane before because these can be a little bit of a handful. They're fast and very responsive on the sticks. If you're not used to flying airplanes, this is not really a beginner plane. It's more of an intermediate to advanced plane. But once you get to this level, with something like this on a 3S battery, you can have a ton of fun. The flight time, I guess, was around 5 to 6 minutes per battery. I have this Flight Power. This is an FP30 battery pack, 3S 11 volt, 1000 milliamp. Right there on Tower Hobbies site, but it mounts right in the front right here. The CG was all spot on and everything was perfectly set up on this airplane. So let's go ahead and put it on the bench. I'll give you a little closer look at this plane and then we'll go outside and do a flight demo of this Edge 540 version 3 race kit. These kits are about $75 too, without the electronics. So fully loaded, you might be in the $200 to $300 range when it's all said and done, but awesome airplane. Now, like I said, this is an awesome airplane, but it's not a beginner plane. I just gotta go ahead and say that over and over in this review. It is definitely not a beginner plane. If you have someone who can help you build this, you can probably fly this as your second or third plane. If you're into electric foamies, this is great. It's not going to take a lot of damage on crashes. And if you do have something separate, like right here on this wing edge right here where my hinge is, I had a little tear right here. So you can just take some sort of tape and put over top of that, and it's not a big deal. Or you can use foam safe glue. But during my build with this instruction manual that came with it, it took about 8 to 10 hours for me to build this. But I would do like a section of the build at a time. And this manual is quite long. It shows all the pieces here in the manual, starting with everything that comes out of the box looks just like this. So you're going to have to go through this entire parts list, all the little pieces and hinges. These are your pieces for your motor mount and your landing gear. Also some of the hardware that comes along with it, along with your push rods here and your winglets that go on top of the wing that help with some of the airflow and give it a better 3D performance. Those definitely, I recommend putting these on there. This will give you a lot of stability when you're trying to hover the plane. So if you want to learn how to hover or do torque rolls and things like that, this is going to make it fly a little smoother. because it was designed by people who do championship style 3D competition. So this is basically like a competition level type 3D plane. But I think the manual, honestly, you know, we can give an honest review like most of these reviews are. It needs work on the manual. The manual's not the greatest, but this plane is mostly for people who have already built planes. So as a person who grew up building planes, I kind of breezed through most of this. There was only a few spots where I ran into trouble, but there's not a lot of English directions on here. It doesn't say anything. All it has is sort of pictograms on here for you to, you know, set in your carbon spars, your wood spar. And a lot of this is in German here because I think Hacker is out of Germany actually, if I remember correctly. Now, on through the back of the manual, same thing. It has a lot of procedures that you have to go through to get this plane dialed in and get your CG spot on. But I kind of followed what they had going here for the battery installation. I actually put my battery through the front of the plane, just like this. And I put a little extra piece of foam here in front of it for something to bounce into if I do go in nose first, because, you know, that's not sacrificing too much resistance from this motor because you have tons of power in this rimfire. Now it does have carbon spars going from the tail up to this front servo, and both of your rear servos are mounted in the front up here, and they have guides along the back side of the fuselage right here. You can barely see them right here, but I had to glue in each one of these, try to get them all level so that we don't have any kind of binding on the servo. Same thing with this side over here. You're going to have to put these little guides in on a vertical position on this side for your elevator, and for the rudder we're on a horizontal position for each of those guides. Now you're looking at the bottom of the plane right here, and this is where I put my receiver, right where the landing gear is, and I put my ESC on the other side, right exactly opposite of the receiver. So I took my motor wires to the ESC here, I twisted them up to make them a little more tidy, and I added a zip tie right there just to kind of keep them from hanging out too far. You don't really need to secure it up close and personal to the side of the fuselage, not really needed. And then I have my XT60 coming here, which reaches around to the top where I have my battery mounted. Pretty simple setup. And I also used a servo harness, a Y harness, to get my ailerons working correctly and join those two servos into one going into the aileron section on the receiver. Now you can also see here there is carbon spars embedded in the wing along this direction and down both sides of the fuselage on that horizontal axis. This is pretty cool because what happens is when I fly really fast and I stop and I slam the stick the other direction, these carbon spars are going to take a lot of that shock out of the airframe and keep the airframe rigid during my hardest maneuvers. And that's super important for a 3D style plane. Now you can see right here where my tactic servo is mounted underneath the wing. This is my aileron servo over here on my left side of the wing. Now it does have an aluminum style servo arm. It doesn't have carbon arm here. And that's totally fine because this is only a short surface, but you have a much harder throw on these than a traditional airplane has. You have sort of an extended servo arm coming up here where this servo rod leads to, this control rod, and they actually glue to the original servo arm and it extends it probably about another half inch up. So you have a ton of throw on this 3D plane, and you have sort of an extended rod mount right here on the back side of that aileron. That's a lot of throw. So if you're watching this video because you're interested to build one of these and you're interested in flying one of these, one of the biggest tips that I can give you for your build is probably going to be the motor mount. This motor mount right here, in the manual they tell you to go ahead and glue this in, but the problem was that the mount that I got with my rimfire 370 is going to put that last position screw. There's only 3 screws here holding this to this motor mount, the actual motor mount in the front of that piece of balsa. There's only 3 screws, so the 2 on this side and this side are totally fine. They're exposed, but the problem is that that bottom one on the very bottom, you can't see it down here. It's actually going to be where the bottom of the fuselage is, so I can't get a screwdriver to it in that position. So what I had to do was actually rip mine back off of the plane, mount the motor to it, and then glue the whole thing in. So if you're building this kit, make sure that you put your motor on there with the prop off, of course, and just go ahead and mount the whole thing up to it. That's the only bummer about that. Or you're going to have to use a different type of mounting bracket on that motor wall. Now this plane, you're going to want to set this up with a slow flyer composite nylon prop, and APC is probably one of the best props that you can get for this plane. It's a 10x47 SF, and that's SF stands for slow flyer. It's not for gas engines. Most slow flyer props are definitely for electric models that are meant to fly a little slower than something like a speed prop. If you know airplanes, you know a speed prop is different than a slow flyer prop, because the slow flyer prop actually is thicker in the core, and on the tip it's going to be a lot thicker. Now a speed prop, I don't have an example of one sitting over here, but a speed prop is going to be way more narrow. It's going to be a little thicker in the thickness of the prop itself, and it's going to have a smaller diameter, a little edge on the very top right here. So much faster prop, the regular prop, the speed prop. And sometimes the speed props are actually used on gas planes or electrics, just depends on the model that you're putting it on. So, but these are not for gas engines. This is strictly for electric airplanes. And now let's talk about power real quick. This Talon 25 by Castle, this is plenty enough ESC to run 3S on here because you're going to draw quite a few amps with this power system, but I was getting like 5 to 6 minute flight times. I might even be able to go a little further with this setup. So my flight battery choice for this aircraft, definitely my number one choice would be that flight power battery from Tower Hobbies, and mainly because it's a good size for it. It balances out the CG perfectly, and it's a 3S 1000 milliamp 30C. It's not the most expensive flight power battery that they have on their site, but you could get a handful of these and you'll be good for the day. Now what you can also try is, well, I've got you here in this video, try out some of the Nanotechs by Eternity. These are 3S 850 milliamp, and they're shorter and sort of more squatty than the 1000 milliamp pack, but this is going to give you a little higher C burst from 25 to 50 C burst on this one. Now this is my second flight with it, and I didn't even have to tune it. All I did was set up the surfaces on the bench and pretty much came out here and just plugged in a battery, and there it is. Look how awesome it's flying. It's a little bit windy right now, so it's kind of a little bit squirrely, but it's a really, really solid flyer. I was pretty surprised. I'm at half throttle right there. It snaps like crazy. See if we can pull it. Outside loop. Really an awesome plane. Now this is like a world-class 3D competitive plane, so I was kind of expecting that it would fly this good. Hacker is quite known in the 3D community. And look at that hover, man. It will just hover inches off the ground. Plenty of power. Look at that. Do some inverted here. Outside loop, low to the ground. Little stall. This prop is great. I've got a little bit of a wind shadow right here, so this is pretty nice. Gonna practice that low to the ground hover. There's a little bit of ground effect right near the ground probably, so. And I've got a park flyer receiver on here, Spectrum park flyer receiver, so I'm not gonna go too far out there. This was not really about range, it's more about line of sight flying and keeping it close in. You can also fly these in a gymnasium in the winter. Now mine did come with landing gear, but I decided not to put the landing gear on this one just because I'm gonna do this hand toss. A little easier for me. But the nice thing about having the landing gear on it, I guess, would be if I touch down in the field out there and it's the right way around, I could just take off again. That's kind of cool. Some straight, big passes. Oh wow, it's flying pretty well in all this wind. Real snappy. And I did give it a little bit of expo. I gave it about 30% expo on the surfaces, mainly because I didn't want it to be too twitchy. On a 3D plane, you kind of want to dial back your servos just a little bit. Your servo response can be pretty snappy if you leave it at 100% or on spectrum at 0. But what an awesome flying machine. Got to say thank you to Hobbyco for sending this one over for us to review. Absolutely a precise flying airplane. A little inverted, slow down. I mean, it goes so slow. It's amazing. You can work on those inverted figure 8s. Switch direction there on your turn. Kind of hard to do with a little bit of wind. It wants to slow down a little bit. So you can FPV this one, but not really an FPV machine. I'm just gonna do it for the fun of it, really. And this battery's probably about done. You're gonna get like a 5-minute flight time with this power system. So I'm gonna bring it over here and land it. And just set it down just like that.